Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher, and this, of course, is one of our HFA webinars. And today we are focusing pretty much a laser focus on e-commerce. Here's what we're not going to have today. We're not going to really be talking about in-store conversions. We want to really focus specifically on e-commerce so that we can really dive deep there so that make sure that you are really enjoying some best practices, you know about great ROI, just all the different things you need to know right now to be on the e-commerce side of things. We've got an amazing panel, so I will introduce them to you in just a minute, but I'm excited about this. But first of all, a little bit of housekeeping just to remind you, bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A tab. If you have a question, click on there, put it in. We'll do our best to get to that question before we're done here. And we do have your questions from those of you that pre-registered, so we have those as well. Also, this webinar and our entire library of webinars can be found on myhfa.org/webinar. It is an amazing library of every subject matter you want to deep dive in to help you grow your business. It's there, myhfa.org/webinar. Also want to thank our sponsor, Synchrony. They are the thought leaders when it comes to our education platforms like these webinars. So we thank them as well. All right. I got it done. We got a lot to talk about, so I better get to this. Let me introduce you to our panel here. And in no particular order, I want to introduce you first to Jenna Clay. She is a vice president and marketing leader for Synchrony, where she leads a group that really handles a lot of critical growth initiatives that really deliver acquisition and sales goals for partners like, you might have heard of these partners, QVC, HSN, Zulily. That's where her specialty is. So she's going to have a lot to add to the party, if you will, today. So Jenna, we're glad to have you here also. Also, we have Laura Curry here. She is the founder of Shoptelligence. You have seen her on here before because she is really a pivotal leader in our industry when it comes to data and analytics and really harnessing the power of AI to really deliver the customer experience both online and in stores, and with always a focus on style, which is always really cool too. So Laura, as always, happy to have you here. We also have Eric Hunter. He's a GM of marketing at AVB. He's an e-commerce leader, has a ton to add to this particular area. And I got to just pivot here for a second, just to remind people, because you might not know this, and it's an important thing to know, that in cooperation with AVB, we offer at HFA, the HFA Buying Source, which is a free, yes, free buying group when you're a member of ours. And of course, this means rebates, discounts, weekly specials, et cetera. So I just want you to know that that's a really great benefit that we have here at HFA. And it's all free with membership. Like I said, we like free all of the time. And Eric, we appreciate you being here. And finally, we have Kai Morton. Kai is with a company you might have heard about in these e-commerce world today, Shopify Plus. He's an enterprise account executive there. And you know that Shopify is a global e-commerce platform for retailers around the world. So man, we've got some serious chops on this program today. Thank you all. Smile. I hope you're happy to be here. Good. Okay, great. All right. It's kind of always hard for me kind of to know where to start, but I think this might be a good place. And Laura, I'm gonna start with you just to kind of get us rolling here, and then I'll go to each of our panelists here. We've had just a shifting landscape for more than 3 years now. COVID, people are calling post-COVID, I mean, all these different things. So could you just give us an idea, just to set the scene here? How would you describe sort of the e-commerce landscape today, right now? How would you describe that?
Specifically in home furnishings?
Sure.
I would say far more sophisticated than it was 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, before COVID began, a website was, just that, was a front, it was an entry to a store. There were many retailers that didn't have e-commerce, didn't really have much fluency in data that comes through, really much, a ton of insight as to what the major KPIs and what success looked like in e-commerce. As COVID hit, obviously, e-commerce became the only open store for many retailers, right, forced them to grow up quickly. And so now what I would say is it's no longer a question in the industry as to whether e-commerce is necessary. It is the real question on people's minds is that we hear often is, to what degree should I be relying on e-commerce? How does it play into the overall customer journey? And then how do I make it as effective as possible? And so it's become a question of how instead of why or whether, I would say, over the past 3 years.
Awesome. Kai, what is your thoughts on that and that as well from your standpoint? I mean, clearly Shopify has seen a great deal of growth.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we think back to COVID, like the most important thing was just getting online, period, right? People were scrambling to get their presence online. Now that we've seen people get more comfortable selling online, I think it's about how we can expand outwards. You know, what other streams are there digitally that we can expand into to increase revenue? And that really comes from having like an omni-channel architecture from a tech standpoint. So one, we get online first, but once we're online, how can we expand that?
Okay, so everybody has, and I love that, Laura, I think you used the word fluency. There's more fluency now, so more people are speaking this language. Jenna, jump in there as well, because these are kind of helpful sort of scene setters for our conversation today. You know, how would you describe the landscape right now after these past 3 years?
Yeah, it's super interesting in my world, supporting retailers that don't have a brick and mortar presence. And so we call it the COVID spike, or the COVID boost, the COVID bump. And frankly, we sometimes take 2020 out of the mix when we're looking at previous year's performance because it was so abnormal. I like to think that things are normalizing, but at the same time, you know, I think there's a lot of the Amazon effect, right? Where, you know, folks are expecting instant gratification. They're expecting things to get delivered in 2 days. They're expecting shipping to be free, you know, all these things. And so I think we're a little bit at this inflection point where it's like, okay, at some point, we're not going to be able to afford all this free shipping or all this cardboard, frankly, and try to kind of figure out how to meet in the middle, so to speak. So it's certainly been an interesting ride, and we're trying to figure out that balance now with our partners, and how to make it work, and how to still maintain and engage, you know, your most loyal customers, who may have been exposed to Amazon that, you know, might not have known it existed before the pandemic.
Yeah, and the only reason I chuckled when you said normal is because I don't think that word is even allowable in the vocabulary anymore. Who knows what that means? Eric, go ahead and weigh in initially here too. Your thoughts.
Yeah, and I would agree with all the other panelists here. I think Laura said it best. It was definitely accelerated over the last 3 years, right? The importance of e-commerce became table stakes. And I think in the past, from a retail perspective, it was always looked at as a channel conflict. I think COVID opened it up as a channel opportunity, right? To find new shoppers, to reach new customers, to enter new markets, to like I said, really meet those consumers where they were at, which was at home on their couch, you know, browsing on their phones or browsing on their laptops. So
Right.
I think acceleration, like I said, I think connecting the dots, looking at it less of being a headwind and more of a tailwind, right? Like I said, it's a propulsion engine, this e-com. And I would say, you know, we've done a lot of researches, and most important piece is understanding on any given day, you likely have 8 times as many people on your website versus that have come into your store, right? So it's a pretty big proportion there when you talk about, like I said, just reaching more shoppers,
Sure.
and using that to your advantage versus looking at it, you know, as a conflict.
I love this. I love the way you all have set the scene. This is great. Okay, so we get this. There's more. I love the fact that it's now no longer an afterthought, et cetera. It's critically important in reaching so many people. So we're gonna have to peel this onion back, you know, one layer at a time. And there's so many places we can go first. And Laura, I'm going to start with you again. But let's talk about some of the elements of e-commerce, and not just about them, but how important they are to impact you know, the overall effectiveness. Can you start out with talking about visual merchandising online? Because I know that's been such a foundational piece for Shoptelligence, and I figured that's why I would start with you on that one. Talk a little bit about where we are right now and the importance of that and some of the best practices.
Absolutely. I know we are talking about e-commerce, but I want to draw a parallel to the store.
Yeah.
So retailers spend a lot of time, a lot of energy and money making sure that the store layout and the vignettes that they put together tell the brand story and really help to sell the merchandising. And so that's an important, furniture specifically is a very visual product set. However, when you think about bits and bytes, right? You go to Amazon as an example, everything's in a taxonomy. So there's not really a concept of vignettes. I want a sofa, I'm going to go to seating or living room and then sofas, and then I'm going to see a gazillion sofas. And that might help sell those gazillion sofas individually, but there's not really a way to tell a story about how that sofa fits into the overall room. Most consumers go to the store because they need expertise, and the vignettes are part of those expertise, part of that expertise. And so by somehow translating what you see in the store to what you get online really helps to make the e-com site that much more effective. So yes, your conversion on the sofa is going to be your conversion on the sofa, but those vignettes work to inspire consumers to really keep walking or keep browsing in the case of e-com. And they also inspire consumers to add on. And having that capability on site is critical to grow ticket size, because ticket sizes in e-com are not as large as in store. So to the extent you can make that visual and merchandising work for you, it helps to not only grow engagement, but also ticket size.
And also it's interesting because I know from your background that that accessorization piece, those suggestions have been a big part of your platform from the beginning. Kai, let me ask you, I mean, this is a great place to start. So let's talk about this. Laura brings out a key piece about this layout here as part of this experience. So talk about what you think are some of those key practices that folks should have on their e-commerce site when it relates to this visual merchandising.
For sure. I think a big one is just, you need to be bold. You need to do something to stick out in today's landscape in the competitive industry. When you get to online, especially, with someone like Shopify, what we're seeing a lot is the use of new innovative tools, whether that's AR or VR, allowing people to have somewhat of that similar personalized experience and seeing something in their home while they're shopping on their couch, with the ability to make that purchase. Going back to what Laura said as well about bundling products, how can we increase that average order value? And whether we're using linking products from a manual perspective or some sort of artificial intelligence in the background to link products that are related or usually bought together, that could definitely help to increase that AOV.
So Jenna, let me throw this to you now. So what are those things that folks can do to create what Kai just described as kind of that wow, you want to catch them. What are some of those go-tos that make sense right now?
Oh, well, I loved when you introduced AR and AI. I mean, I know I did a lot of redecorating and painting and all those fun things during COVID. And I think just having accessibility to some of those tools to have a little bit of fun, right? So it's taking a picture of your room and how do I style this in my room? And being able to provide those maybe features and benefits, if you will, to somebody who's shopping with you online and perusing your site first. I think that gives them some accessibility to visualize it in their own space, in addition to kind of perusing, online as well.
So Eric, are there ways to, that in your mind that are the most effective ones right now to go ahead and kind of, again, I keep using Kai's word, but to kind of wow people from this visual merchandising piece, because it's not just that it's well put together, but it's got to be something that does impact me.
Yeah, I think obviously, he talked about VR and AR, and having high quality, high resolution, product images, I think is imperative. I think the components that Laura talked about of really moving from selling the piece to selling the space, right? Upselling, cross-selling, everything in between, selling that room. It comes down to good old-fashioned merchandising. There's tools out there that will continue to accelerate merchandising practices to combine those elements. I think the one thing we've also seen is the landscape is changing, right? So, my parents used to have everything match, right? It was the same wood, the same trim. It was all traditional. Now, my wife's decor is, okay, I want a light wood over here and a dark wood over there. So it's becoming more complex. And I'd say there's a big opportunity for core merchandising strategies and then layering on top of that personalization at the consumer level. So you're not necessarily showing the same thing to everybody, right? Because what I may like in my browsing history may give key indicators that I'm different than the way Jenna's going to go into your website and try and purchase things as well. So a lot of it is driven by this kind of underlying data layer. And really it's good data in, good data out, I'd say at the core of it as well. And being able to have that algorithm and all those different tools and quite frankly, the merchandise at the other end, putting those pieces together.
So boy, you guys gave me a lot more to unpack here that I wasn't necessarily going to get to this second, but I think we got to stop at the moment on personalization and customization. Because Laura, what what Eric just added there, which I thought was important, is that, you know, I love what you talked about as far as the, you know, being able to really, you know, visualize better and things of that sort. However, he's talking about that customization piece is got to be critical, right? So it's not cookie cutout even on your e-commerce site.
Yeah, and I think there are a few ways to go about it. Personalization, absolutely, right? You're capturing first party data, using that data to personalize the overall shopping experience, I think is one. The other one is interactivity. So Jenna mentioned fun, right? How do you make it fun for a shopper to put their look together, to mix the pieces of wood, as Eric, the types of wood as Eric mentioned. So you've got personalization, which you've got the data layer, and layering that in is important. And then there's also this idea of interactivity, and that's where AR tools like what we offer, et cetera, allow the shopper to really customize it. And so both of those things together, I think, help the shopper become engaged and data. The more product a shopper looks at, the higher the purchase intent. There's a strong correlation there. So to the extent you can get a fun experience going that's sticky, it behooves you as a retailer to do that. Personalization is one way to do that. Interactivity is another way to layer on top of personalization, et cetera.
But I'm kind of saw you kind of nodding there when you talked about interactivity. Can you also kind of jump in on that, because that sounds like a real critical piece for everybody?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. Obviously, with the personalization, we can start surfacing, products and images that are relevant to the customer or that shopper. But going back to Eric's point, like my browsing history, for example, might not reflect what my living room looks like today. And sometimes it's important to also show like the art of the possible in that room, right? So someone like me who's shopping and maybe doesn't have an eye for design can see actually like this is a room, an organic modern room. And now I can shop the look in that room and start to pick pieces out that maybe I wouldn't have looked for otherwise. So I think there is two sides to the interactivity on a website.
Jenna, what are some of the insights we might be able to glean from the QVCs and HSNs of the world when it comes to this personalization and customization question?
Well, I was going to add in, and it kind of dovetails into what Q and H are doing now, but it's also not just about the site, it's getting them there. So how do I get the eyeballs, whether it be from another channel, whether it be from social media? I think when we were talking about the different woods in the room that Eric was mentioning, like if I went through my screenshot history on my cell phone, I just screenshot Instagram all the time of little vignettes of like designer rooms and such, because I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea, I'm going to save it for next time, or whenever I am perusing that e-com site to kind of start to pull my stuff together. So I think personalization may tie in there with, maybe it be retargeting if they visited your site and then they've left, or how do you bring them in the first place to know that maybe you're a local retailer that they should be visiting because of XYZ. So making that experience relevant to them, so that they even get to your site in the first place, or they come back if they leave.
I would add in there, Mark, if you,
yeah, go. I was
going to add on that kind of one last piece of it, since we're talking independent retail. I think the retail sales associate in any given store, that's their specialty, right? Kind of ask the question and do the golden pause. What are you looking to do, right? The inspiration phase of it. I think staffing, to have support on your website is also a critical element. So for consumers who may be looking but not knowing, having live chat, having your phone number front and center, and being there when they're looking for support. Like I said, I think a website is really your cheapest, and I would say most arguably your most important storefront or your showroom, right? And so staffing it all the same to find those customers who, to Jenna's point, you've gotten through the door to get them across the register. There are still going to need those customers who don't understand the tool or don't want to use the tool. So having a human they can correspond with as well, I think, is a critical piece of closing more of those shoppers.
One of the things that and gosh, I haven't told this story in probably a couple of years, but there was a really highly thought of top 20 retailer in our space who, when the brick and mortar stores were closed, took their best salespeople and put them on the phones. And holy smokes, it was that realization that just having that experience on that other line. And then a lot of them went to chat when that kind of came. It's just, it's interesting how, we can't, I guess it's a great little sort of a side takeaway, not to forget the human factor in this whole thing, because all of these tools are fantastic, but boy, having that ability for that connect, like you said, Eric, to that person that might still not quite be comfortable with all the technology. That's pretty awesome. So, you guys are just killing it with takeaways. I'm sitting here with like my list of what were the questions, and now really we're going off in a better. All right, so I'm going to throw this one out to whoever wants to jump in first. And this is all Jenna's fault. She talked about retargeting. Let's drill down on that. And she said about getting more eyeballs on the site. That's something that, I mean, obviously you can have the best site in the world, but if nobody's looking at it, it's not worth a lot. So let's talk about that. Who wants to talk about some of the really important steps with retargeting?
I can take a stab at it. Like I said, I'm in the marketing space, checking your watch there. Like I said, I think it's
my coin flip, actually.
Oh, gotcha. I think, retargeting is a way to fish where the fish are at, for lack of a better term, right? When you put it in that perspective, they're customers you've already seen that have already been somewhat exposed to you or your brand or your presence, and bringing them back through the door. I think furniture has a unique opportunity in terms of, number of times people buy furniture per year. If you look at Wayfair's public earning report, they're well over 2 times per year. People are coming back and shopping with them online because my mirror broke, or I don't like the color of that ugly office chair, or my office chair is broken because I've been sitting in it from home for 3 years, whatever it may be. So I think there's a component there to account for. Like I said, it's through pixels, through some of this first party data, Laura's talking about, it's becoming honestly a little bit more difficult to some degree with anonymization of consumers and their PII, their personal information, and that being a little bit more hidden. But there's some still, email marketing, retargeting through social retargeting, traditional, those are still very high performing tactics. Like I said, mostly because you've already left an imprint on that consumer. Now you've got to, bring them back through the door and let them see you again.
Laura, would you jump in on that too? Because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's an old saying, I know my marketing budget is 50% effective. I just don't know which 50%, right? Everyone's heard that. And so retargeting, I think, really helps to understand which 50%, if you will. So the idea here is people buy furniture typically in spurts because they've got projects, and it typically happens around some sort of life event, which is about every 3 years in the average person's life. And so the idea of really boosting your CAC, or cost of customer acquisition effectiveness, so marketing effectiveness, is if you can identify shoppers who are in market and who have intent currently and focus your budget there, you are more likely to get a higher conversion rate. And so the concept of retargeting, if you take a website visit, for instance, to a retailer's website as an intent signal, being able to capitalize on that intent signal and quickly retarget, whether it's digitally, whether it's by mail, whether it's by email, whatever the case may be, to the extent you can identify the customer, the more effective your marketing is going to be. So retargeting is a great way to really get people back to your site. Anytime you can link your marketing to a person with a clear intent signal, the more effective that you're going to be. First party data is a way to do that. Pixels are other ways to do that, in addition to search, etc. But intent-based marketing really is, I would put retargeting under the bigger category of intent-based marketing.
Appreciate that. I want to get to a couple of questions because you guys have already stirred up a bunch here. And I think it's important to point out that, our audience, our membership at HFA is the broad spectrum of the largest retailer in our space down to, the mom and pop store in the corner. And so not everybody has, budgets of equal size or the abilities to always have things. This is a question that came through, and I'll throw this one out. I think I'll throw this one out. Kai, I'm going to let you take this one. It says, how can we increase online customer furniture sales without necessarily having access to the technology like the digital image rendering and things of that sort? So if they don't have all these tools, is there a way that they can somehow still play in this market?
Yeah, I think that brings up an interesting point. You know, a big shift that we saw in the e-commerce industry, especially in furniture, was people trying to get away from maintaining technology and more so focusing on growing their business. And part of that is not necessarily building things custom themselves, right? And actually using partners or partnering with certain companies that have that functionality already. So I think that can significantly drop the cost of, you know, these endeavors when we're partnering with someone who's already done that, and not trying to reinvent the wheel or build something custom on our website.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point, because
If I
one of
could
the
add something.
go, Jenna.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I'll give a little plug to the Synchrony research team, which I'm sure some of our partners and such have heard about. But we conduct a study every year called our major purchase study, and it basically kind of drills down into various ways on how people, research what they're going to buy, and then ultimately how they buy it, whether they finance it or what have you. And I'm just looking at the study that we did this year. In the furniture category, 75% of people start their research online, but then 78% still do in-store research. So while the e-com, kind of going back to Laura's earlier point, like obviously the e-com space is table stakes now, you have to have some sort of presence, but ultimately, it's still important to drive them in store as well. So while the tools and stuff are sexy and fun, ultimately there still is that element of, they like to touch it and feel it and, sit on the couch and think about how it might look in their space.
Hey, fair enough. And just you understand where these questions are coming from, right? Just it's all about budgets, right? And can they afford these types of things? Eric, I wanted to, oh, go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to throw in, I think there are, for the smaller retailers also, as technology has gotten more mature, prices in some cases may have come down, or some, especially on the marketing front, there may be some variable cost approaches. So instead of, I pay a subscription for X, maybe it's a per unit or some sort of revenue sharing type model that have become more available these days than they were, in past days. And so they're also not just the technology changing, but also the subscription models may be changing also.
Love that. So that's a great question for any retailer listening that's in that space, to ask that question. I mean, that's a great point. Jenna, did you want to jump back in? No.
No, I'm good.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kai. I saw somebody move. I didn't know which box it was. Kai, go ahead.
Yeah, going back to Jenna's point about how people still want to go into the store and feel things and see them for themselves. I think that brings up an even bigger point of having unified systems and having something where someone can do that in store, and then hey, maybe they don't want to bite the bullet and purchase today, but I can build that cart in store for them, send it to them, and then they can purchase it online at a later date. I think that workflow or user flow gets overlooked a lot, and it allows you to have that personalized experience in store, but still sell that item digitally through your e-commerce presence. So
interesting. That's huge. Eric, you want to chime in on that?
I was going to go down the same path. So Kai gave me a little bit of head start. Like I said, I think while the technology and tools are great, I think it still comes down to people helping people. And to his point, for that customer who has found you online or found you through a newspaper ad and has decided to come to your store and visit with you, boss used to call it the be back bus, and the be back bus usually doesn't come back, right? So how do you make that experience a destination type experience, to come to your showroom, to spend the time to go out of their way? To Kai's point, build out if they're not ready to purchase today, but make it easier for them to purchase at their convenience after that, right? So they don't have to come in a second or third time. So build the cart, build the quote, send the email, and allow them to go home, discuss it, maybe over a glass of wine or maybe over their favorite TV show, and order it at their leisure once they really have made up their mind. I think that's one of the biggest friction points, and Kai hit it, is interconnected systems, because that's what consumers expect, right? Just remove the friction. If I came and saw you once, we talked about what I was looking for, you helped me build this amazing feature, I don't necessarily want to come back a second time, but I do still want to buy from you. And so being there and providing that, I think, is a huge piece of the puzzle.
I love the way you guys have managed to sort of turn this around, right? That we think sometimes that it's a flow specifically from online into store, and you just talked about a great value here to parlaying that in-store experience to just transacting online. Now, the only caveat there is obviously for those listening is you have to be able to transact online, and that's just, not everybody is up to speed on that, but interesting way of looking at it, because that also takes a lot out of the whole concern about dollars sometimes. So that's really kind of cool. And Eric, I want to just have you respond to this one real quick, because I think you've already pretty much answered this, but you talked about chat and other things. And the question was, how do we overcome the objection of customers feeling uncomfortable buying home goods online? I think it's a wonderful question. I think you talked a little bit about chat and make sure the phone numbers are. Any other things you'd like to add into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about a few of them, but it's having the right assets, it's having a competitive price, it's having a strong presence. And to the same degree, I think it's also having an option or making them aware that, like I said, whether that's a live chat agents, when we read through chat logs, a lot of times it's reassurance, right? This sectional says it's 64.5 inches. I have 66 inches. Will it fit? So I think a lot of times it's reassurance as well for these consumers. So like I said, it's not always technology. I'd say there's a big piece of the AR, VR, augmented reality, mixed reality, seeing those products in your space that will continue to gain traction. From an adoption perspective, I don't know that it's fully there yet. But again, I think there's small ways as well, to make your showroom feel and look like the destination that it is, that you are the experts in the industry, and that quite frankly differentiate yourself with the services you offer. 150 years of combined sales experience, experts across the board, sleep experts, things like that. And that's the differentiator for independent retail versus what they could go buy anywhere else, right?
Laura, do me a favor in kind of dovetailing with that. It sounds to me a lot what Eric's talking about there is about building trust with the customer. That's a big part of it. I know that's a little bit nebulous sometimes when we hear that, but can you talk about how important that is and maybe ways to achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an analytics geek, so I reduce things down to KPIs. And to me, it's all the major KPI we're talking about here is conversion. And so if you think about what the impact is on conversion, just to throw out a couple stats. Average conversion on a furniture retailer website is about 0.5%. Versus in store, where I've seen some as high as, high 40s, but I'd say the industry average is about 25%. So you're looking at a pretty substantial multiple. Why is that? Okay, some of it is somebody's gone online. To Jenna's point, 75% of people shop online, 78% buy in store. So they're further down the purchase funnel. But the other piece is confidence. Confidence, as Eric was saying, like, will it fit? Will it be comfortable? Will it XYZ? And the sales associates play a huge role in that. So the idea of pulling the sales associates into the e-commerce experience to help them build confidence. AR, VR tools are great ways to help customers get that confidence and that trust that the product they're looking at will fit and they will have the confidence. You see case goods, you look at Wayfair's average ticket, it's lower, but they do really well in case goods versus upholstery. Why is that? You're not as confident buying upholstery. You need to sit in the sofa, you need to whatever. And so it also varies by category. So yes, there's two sets of confidence. The first one is, am I confident in this retailer? Do they have expertise? Do they have return policies? Like if I make a bad decision, what happens? Do they have, can I get it on time, et cetera, all of those. And then there's confidence in your product decision, which is where a lot of these tools that we've been talking about come into play, and sales associates have a huge role to play in building the product confidence.
And in all of those things, as I'm hearing you say that, the word that kept popping into my head, and Jenna, I'll throw this to you and let you get into this too, is that you're basically, by all those things you talked about, you are preemptively thinking about the objections, which can be the size, the fit, the reticence on things being delivered, et cetera. So Jenna, this is really a critical piece of this, isn't it? As far as this building kind of this customer trust and building your own credibility with them in this e-commerce experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually wrote down two words: trust and relationships, because I think there's two things. I wouldn't, I guess, or I would maybe reframe it. You know, there's an importance to Google reviews, right? So, and this is not even on your website, but if it's like I'm Googling, you know, furniture near me, right? And, you know, a whole listing's going to pop up. I'm likely going to visit the top 2 or 3 that have better Google reviews, because they have, likely, going back to Eric's earlier point, sales associates that are developing that relationship. So there's kind of that bridge again of the offline and the online, and trying to build that trust and the credibility online, you know, with reviews on your site, reviews on the products on your site, but also just reviews on your brick and mortar store and your sales associates, to get them in store, so you can build that relationship. So then you become, you know, their trusted place to visit anytime they're looking for something new.
So since we have Kai, you here with Shopify Plus, what are the things right now, the top few things that you guys are finding are those critical pieces that build that trust?
Yeah, 100%. I really like how Laura broke it up in the 2 sides of this. When we talk about building trust, like in that checkout experience and proving kind of the legitimacy of the business, something that I look for as a consumer right away is familiar accelerated checkout methods, right? Like, do they have Apple Pay? Do they have Google Pay? Things that I'm already signed up on as a consumer. At Shopify, we obviously have Shopify Payments as well, which is our accelerated checkout method. We did a study recently that showed just the mere presence of having that button on your checkout increased conversion by 5%, even if people went through a manual checkout experience. So it is really about a familiar checkout. How seamless is it? And are there options there that I'm used to shopping through? The other side to this is, I think people forget to talk to your customers, you know, understand what's important to them, scour your reviews. This will ultimately uncover what's most important to your power users, and then we can put those objections or you know, those deal breakers on the landing page and get in front of them before we need to. So that's kind of my perspective.
I love that.
Yeah,
And
I did it
go
on.
ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna add on there. I kind of agree with Kai more, right? With those payment methods, convenience. You know, everything I do in my life now, I just tap it. You know, just like most of the rest of the newer generation with smartphones in their hands that are equipped. But I will say, I think one of the biggest pieces we haven't talked about to move things upstream is we've talked about getting people to these people on these products and getting them to check out. But I think findability. So having a good search engine on your website is a critical piece as well. And that ties back to having clean data, right? So if somebody's telling you that they're looking for a gray left arm facing sectional, when they type that in, because that's the #1 used element on every single website in the world, right? They should be able to find it, or at least options that look like it to some degree. So I think just to take it back upstream, it's going to come down to foundational information, alleviating that friction through each step of the process. Not only can I search for it, find the option I'm looking for, can I easily add them to a cart? Do I easily know your policies, return policies? I think that was a great point earlier. And do I have confidence to then smoothly check out with some sort of convenient payment method? I couldn't agree. I think it all ties together though.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think you're saying the trust is built on, you know, it's delivering on what they're looking for, but it's also delivering a process. And when I hear that, you know, and I hear things about ease of purchase, that kind of stuff, the word I use, and I'm coming at this as just as a consumer, is respect. Wow, this company clearly understands the process and wants to make it easier on me. I give points for that. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And Laura, I do want to get back to the checkout experience in a second, but let's talk about what Eric said there for a minute, and how this is just a kind of a singular conversation with a lot of parts to it, but it does really, I guess, start with all of this ease of how to access things, and that's part of this experience too, is the utility piece of it.
Yeah. You know, there are some shoppers that browse furniture websites for fun. But generally people are there for a purpose. And so helping them most conveniently and efficiently, to Eric's point, get through that process with well-oiled tools, etc., and really understanding their process is really important. So I agree, search is very important. Helping the shopper find that initial set of products to look at. helping them find similar items, because if it's not that left arm facing gray sofa, it's another one that may look similar to it. So really designing the process around how the consumer answers the questions they're trying to do. So understanding the whole journey of the customer. And I know we're focused today on specifically e-commerce, but we cannot ignore the fact that this is by its nature an omni-channel purchase. And so not just understanding the visit to the site, which tends to be where the shopper starts, but how is that site going to support that entire end-to-end process? And I think Kai brought up a really good point, which is what I like to call the digital and data underpinnings of the end-to-end omni-channel shopping process. And so being able to follow the customer and understand their true journey, and it's not always the same path. So take the top 3 paths and really align the process and the underlying and the supporting tools to align to how that shopper is thinking versus how the retailer is trying to sell. You want to help the shopper buy. You don't want to sell to the shop.
Interesting.
I love that point. And I was going to kind of tie that in a little bit with what Eric was saying earlier. And, I think a lot of it all comes down to data and leveraging the data that you have while the people are on site. So, where are those friction points? When are people abandoning cart? Or maybe they're abandoning earlier in the cart. They're not even getting to the cart, trying to figure out like what we've done with our QVC and HSN partners is literally mapping out the process. And it, with an old school piece of paper, they land here, then they go there, then they have to scroll, then they have to click, then they have to log in, then they scroll again. And as you can imagine, like as any consumer just gets frustrated with some of those processes. So I always think about, leveraging the data, trying to understand the journey on the site. Where are people abandoning? How can we start to slowly chip away at some of those friction points to ultimately, make it the best experience online, and then maybe even, grab them and have them come in store where you can have them, talking to the sales associate, which is, the bread and butter from a furniture standpoint.
You said something really, really interesting because my son is a director of product for an e-com company. And by the way, I will point out to you that it sometimes has a great deal of value to stand back, whether it's a whiteboard or whatever, and actually physically draw it out.
Yep.
I mean, that's one of those things that a lot of those great ideas start there. And that's how they've made some huge inroads in conversion, things like that in his company. So it's just interesting. So before we leave the subject, let me just ask, and I was gonna actually ask Jen, I was gonna ask you, so I don't mean for you to do double duty here, but with your connections to QVC and to HSN and to Zulily, they obviously know a lot about that checkout experience. Can you talk a little bit about some of those elements that you think would be germane to this audience about really those key seamless checkout type of processes?
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as I think about it, is the least friction, the better. So like I was kind of just mentioning, the scrolling, the clicking, the logging in just ultimately frustrates people. And so once you have them to the checkout page, how can I get that, button click as simple as possible? So simple things like, we call it above the fold. So you don't want people to have to scroll to click a button. You want it just on the main, portion of the page. Little just tactics like that. So we've worked with our partners to say, hey, put a button up here instead of down there. Providing financing options, as I'm sure our Synchrony partners talk to you guys all the time, but that certainly helps oftentimes, close a conversion, because most folks aren't, willing to spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a couch out of pocket all the time. So do we have options at checkout that allow that customer, once they're there, to seamlessly to check out with maybe some financing options along the way?
And Eric, I want you to jump in on that too, just because I know we kind of didn't get all that from you a minute ago, but I'd love to get your take too.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, I couldn't agree more. I think transparency, we talked about earlier, having all the fees, front and center so that there's no surprises when you do get to that kind of last
Mhm.
click. I think as well, we haven't really talked about it, but availability and availability messaging is critical. We live in a world of Amazons and, like I said, Wayfairs, right? Where I could order something today and get it this afternoon, depending on what
Yep.
it is. So integrated, point of sale or integrated inventory availability, I think, is critical to showing the consumers, not only do I have this product and do I have it at a competitive or best price, it's also ready to get to your house in less than 3 days, right? Whatever your delivery scheduling is. So I think moving it again kind of upstream is, it's all connected, but it all leads to kind of that final mile in the checkout process. And kind of talked about, easy payment methods. I'd say with COVID, and especially over the last 16 months with all the macroeconomic components, having those buy now, pay later type financing options, whether it be an Affirm, a charge after, whatever, there's a bunch of them out there now, but having that front and center and offering more than just being able to put in my credit card, but terms, I think is a critical piece as well. Whether they're terms that are comparable to what you offer in store or a subset of what you offer in store, just to make sure you're capitalizing to the fullest.
And Laura, I know that when it comes to that availability question, that's something you've been preaching for a long time. You want to talk a little bit about the importance of that too, and that gets back to our credibility and trust thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about managing customer expectations, right? So a shopper may be willing to wait and they may not be willing to wait. So using that almost as a filter up front in the shopping process, if that's an important facet to them. I think
Can we pause there for a second? So when you say, can you give an example of how that can be upfront and in a
Well,
way that can be done?
just, I hate to use Amazon as a benchmark, but you can get it today as a filter, because if I need something immediately, I don't
Okay.
care how beautiful that end table is. If it's not going
Right.
to get here before I have, my guests, it's going to be useless. And so just looking, and it goes back to product data that Eric was talking about. It's important to have a great handle on product data, including, I view that as kind of a merchandising data point versus a stylistic data point, but like price, availability, delivery, is it eligible for, white glove delivery or not? Those kinds of things are also important facets, and they help to build trust by the shopper of the retailer.
So
Yeah, I was
Kai,
going to add on to that because
go ahead.
sorry, Mark,
Go
I
ahead.
was going to add it. We've dealt with this a lot, and I think Laura's correct, right? Having a filter within each category, or even having its own tab, in your main header.
Yeah.
You have living room, dining room, bedroom, office, in-stock product or quick ship product, as well as visual badges or call to actions, within the catalog itself. Quick ship can be ambiguous to a degree, right? Like I said, I think we live in this world where people are like, well, I can't deliver it in 2 days. Say quick ship. It can be a little bit vague, right? Quick ship may be a different meaning to me than you all, but I think it's still that reassurance that I can still get it somewhat timely.
And I want to put this all together, because I know from all the conversations I have with our retailers, we know a lot of retailers still have more inventory than they need. This is also a great way to target some of those items they know they've got a lot of, and that can be your online in-store, available special kind of a thing. There's ways to help ease a lot of issues that our members are having right now. Kai, please jump in on this whole question about the availability piece up front and what you guys have seen with Shopify.
Yeah, I think going back to my previous point about having unified systems, right? The ability to let somebody know that it's available for local pickup is a huge benefit. I prefer to shop that way. When we think about white glove service or maybe some stronger call to actions for delivery that are only available online, right? That could potentially bring people to the website. So I think there's some different ways to do it there. Well, again, when we talk about trust, I think our customers are going to tell us what they want and what they need in that checkout experience. There's a story that we use with a merchant that they kept figuring out after using a heat map tool that customers would get to their checkout and then go to their FAQ. By putting that FAQ in the checkout flow and just that one simple question, they increased conversion. So your customers will tell you what they're looking for, and then we just have to make those changes appropriately.
Interesting. And so the FAQ with all those ancillary issues to answer all those questions. Interesting. Okay. So they were looking for that. I know that I steered us away from this initially just because of the cost factor, et cetera. But I really want to talk though about, and I'll start with you, Jenna, as far as, what are those technologies right now between, AI, AR, and VR, et cetera. What are those things that are really, you think, paying off in big ways for folks that are on the e-commerce side?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we're doing is a little bit different in partnering with QVC and HSN is live streaming. Amazon is trying to dabble in the space. And abroad it's very popular, so we're anticipating that space is going to grow significantly. But as I see the tools, it's figuring out how to personalize the experience and figuring out like who are our customers and what might they need. So I think one of the things we always talk about with our partner is the QVC shopper is typically like a 68-year-old woman. We know her income, we know kind of where in the country she lives. And so you likely have all of that data on your shoppers. Maybe they're not the ones that want to, use the AR and VR, but maybe they want to use some other kind of tool. So it's thinking about who is your customer and trying to think about it from their lens and customizing, the experience for that type of shopper.
Laura?
This is not going to be a very popular response because I know AR, VR, AI are all really hot topics, but I go back to that data underpinning. Unless you can collect the data to do what Jenna just said, which is really understand, and Kai just said, what's important to your customers, you can throw money after money after money after a technology. And in this world where sales are down for most retailers, the good ones are pretty much flat this year. Really understanding your cost of customer acquisition has to be number one. And then aligning your technology and ad and everything spend around how those shoppers like to shop and how they convert is really important. So I would say things like customer data platform, data-driven marketing, all of those type things are probably the best bet. Some of them are expensive and the value of data is abstract, but once you learn how to use it, it becomes invaluable and really a force multiplier for any other technology you end up buying in the future.
You warned us that you were a data geek, that you're the one that said that. I did not. And I knew that you would go there. No, I knew that you would go there. We're actually getting sort of close to our finale here, but I wanted to ask this, and Eric, I'll start with you. So just give an idea what you think are the really the best, if you will, best ways to measure your success in this e-commerce world. Everybody has their own kind of favorite KPIs that they look at and things of that sort. What do you think are the key things that retailers should really be paying attention to as they continue to venture online?
Yeah, I agree with Laura. There's a lot of valuable data in there, but I think what you're saying, Mark, is what should you look at? There's trackability across different tactics that you can use, some more trackable than others, right? A click coming from Google versus who saw your newspaper ad, for instance. So I think making sure your dollars are focused on things that can be measured, for the most part is going to be critical. And then what to measure, from what we look at is exactly what Laura's talking about: customer acquisition cost per click, what keywords, are getting more engagement than than not, what keywords do we need to remove that aren't converting? So, things we look at are how did my digital marketing efforts or how did my online presence drive, obviously transactions, revenue, add to carts, the intent to purchase, right? Store visits or directions, phone calls, live chats. Those are kind of the 5 key that we continue to track and try and do this kind of gray area of attribution. Because when you talk about having a very physical brick and mortar location and a very digital website, there is a little bit of gray area in between, especially, like I said, as we lose some access to this PII, the personal information that all of us are now moving to first party. But those are kind of the 5 we look at: transactions, add to carts, calls, chats, and directions. That's the intent to purchase, meaning we found the right customer at least, right?
Okay, appreciate that. Kai, you want to jump in on this as far as your thoughts when it comes to the measurements that you hang your hat on?
Definitely. I think Eric, hit the nail on the head there, but maybe thinking more out of the box. What we've seen be successful in the past is using measuring success as a way to retarget your customers as well, right? Like, are we maybe providing them something for feedback, whether it's a discount or like a referral or something like that? How can we get in touch with our customers and retarget them and get feedback on that to measure success as well, as opposed to just looking at it from a data or like behavioral standpoint?
Okay, Jenna, would you mind weighing in on that one as well?
Sure. I always just say follow the money. So you might be getting a conversion, but it might be at the expense of doing something else. So ultimately, I think it comes down to revenue. We recently worked with our partners because they were concerned about conversion, but we're kind of trying to say, well, yes, we might take down conversion slightly, but if they do it, on a financing option, ultimately in the long run, it's going to be XYZ multiple. So I think thinking about it is follow the money, and it's not necessarily transactional in that one, instance, but sometimes you got to play the long game sometimes.
Okay, fair. Laura, would you like to weigh in on what you think are the key measurements that folks should really be paying attention to?
Yeah, so attribution is something that we spend a ton of time on. But so to really be able to measure it effectively based on taking an action, measuring the reaction. But the major KPIs we look at are average order value, conversion rate. We look at cost of acquisition. So the cost per, whether it's cost per website visitor, cost per add to cart, cost per in-store visitor, cost of customer recapture, and then customer lifetime value.
Okay. Well, there's, I guess you kind of have to, kind of pick and choose. But what I'm really hearing you all say here that I think is, that just is that low tech, good old fashioned way of looking at things is just knowing your customer. And Laura, you talk about data. Eric, you talked about this. That nothing really, and maybe I'll just throw that as one final question, whoever wants to jump in, there's really nothing that supplants that. And there's not a great deal of cost with that. It's just really understanding them. Anybody want to take that on? Because I don't always want to lose that fact and have people think that it's just, we plug this in, plug that in, and we're doing better. It really gets down to those basics that even they've been dealing with all these years in their stores. Who'd like to jump in on that?
I mean, I can jump in a little bit. I mean, the way we think about it for my partners a little bit differently, but there's still a lot of folks out there that don't have an email address, right? So how do we reach those people? We have to think a little bit differently, and how do they want to be communicated to? Direct mail, old school, still works. We still do it all the time. And so as we think about knowing the customer, it's how do they interact with us? How do they shop with us? How do they prefer to be talked to? Sometimes it's not via email because maybe they're old school, or maybe they just get too many emails, so they just shut it out. So I think, truly understanding who's shopping with you, who's coming back, who's visiting you more often, who are they? Are they male, female? What's the demographic? That will help you inform, future marketing opportunities and decisions as you think about the future.
Yeah, I think to add on to Jenna, I think the old saying is first impressions are lasting impressions, right? So like I said, I think it starts at that very first interaction, how they're able to find you when they get there, what they're able to do, and whether or not, your business, what you carry, your core values align with theirs. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, you said something, Jenna, it really resonated with me because I've preached it for a long time, is there's nothing more valuable than knowing what communication channel your customer prefers. Boy, there's gold there. If you can get that information, I think you're steps ahead. This has been a terrific hour. I want to thank all of you for your patience in answering all of my questions and stopping and starting us. But there's just been so many things that have you brought up some great takeaways that I just wanted to steer us around, but I really appreciate it. So I want to give my official thanks first and foremost to Jenna Clay, Vice President, Marketing Leader with Synchrony and her clients QVC and HSN and Zulily. Laura, founder of Shoptelligence, always love having you on. You're one of our top industry experts. Eric Hunter, GM of Marketing, AVB, thank you so much for being here as well. And I want to thank Kai Morton. Kai's Enterprise Account Executive for Shopify Plus. Once again, appreciate all of your input today. And a reminder, that this webinar will be on demand starting tomorrow at myhfa.org/webinar. On behalf of all of us here at HFA, I always like to wish you not only good sales, but good health. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.